What's up, guys? Here we are with part three of the podcast, America's Dark Truth Hidden from the World Population. Very excited to jump into this. I feel like I've had my mind open so much. And here we are with the final part. Before we do jump in, make sure you guys subscribe, ring the notification bell, give the video a thumbs up. Let's do it.
These societies I've seen in the longest time.
I'm going to speak about something I've not spoken about on the podcast yet, which was Veer Das's poem, which he performed in the US, and there was a big controversy around it. I actually wish to host Veer Das on the show whenever I can. I do look up to him as an artist, as a stand-up comic, as a writer. But I'm not completely in agreement with what he did because he portrayed a dark aspect of India out there on a public forum in America. I think it was called Two Indias, where he spoke about one great aspect of it, about the culture and spiritualism. And then he backed it up with like the Islamophobia and all that world knows India as today. Every single country in today's day and age is a mixed bag. That's what's crucial. We're not saying that India is better than America or America's not as good as other countries and all that. But the truth is that we live in an age where every single country is a mixed bag. Every single country has its own problems.
Facts.
This particular we'll probably address. Would you like to say anything about the
Absolutely.
Vedas?
So I would like to say something that most people won't like, many people won't like. I call him a brown coolie. It's not a very flattering thing to say. There are certain people who, in order to curry favor in the West, specialize in what some would say shitting on their own people. You know, you go outside your country and you denigrate your own culture, your own people, and you try to amplify the overall impression that the people in that country have about India. So if you look at the overall depiction of India in the Western media and the US media, whether it is the Washington Post, whether it's the New York Times, they always try to denigrate India. When India did this world record of 103 satellite launches in one rocket, they put up this cartoon of India trying to enter the elite space club with a cow. Right?
Crazy.
So they always try to put this colonial backward image of India. And that's how they would like to see India. It's a very Hindu-phobic image of India. India is a backward country with a primitive, barbaric, pagan culture where you have whatever phobia, and women are downtrodden and minorities are downtrodden. These are all lies. I disagree with
These are definitely all that's showed in the Western media, 100%.
this completely. And Veer Das, in order to become famous there, went there and made all these statements on a public stage, which I think is shameful. He should be ashamed of himself.
I want to quote Joe Rogan as well. Joe Rogan constantly talks about the media world in America being entirely governed by the left wing. And for the record, I feel I'm personally centrist. I'm not on either side. That's just my political opinion from a overall, even international perspective. I feel, why should there even be two wings? There's probably a little bit of good on both sides. But
Exactly.
Joe Rogan himself has said that most of the media world, Hollywood, the television industry is very kind of tends to left in America. Most of it, other than I think Fox News, which is leaning towards right. And in Hollywood circles, in acting circles, in these kind of circles, basically the media world of America, you have to say the politically correct things, which in that particular circle is
Facts.
stuff that would please the left wing.
Yes.
And maybe this is an echo of that same.
Maybe he just wants to succeed there. I mean, he's an outsider. He wants to become one of the inner circle. And to do that, you have to please them, whoever is in power. You cannot say things they won't like. Otherwise, you will get no visibility whatsoever. And you will be out. To get in, you have to play the game. And you have to act the part. And so he's going to do that. He's fine to do that. I mean, whatever, for good or bad, he's doing it. He's succeeding. He's getting invited for podcasts. I'm sure that he's a reasonably well sought after comedian. I don't find any of his comedy funny. Comedy is funny when you're not making fun of a certain class of people or a certain group of people. When you're making fun of human nature, that's when you're funny. I understand what comedy is, what humor is. When you make fun of yourself, that's funny. When you make fun of human nature as a whole, that's funny. When you make fun of a certain political segment of society, it's not funny. It's unfunny. So I don't understand this political humor. When you're just trying to appease one certain political class of people, that is not funny whatsoever. That's politics. You're just pandering to politics when you do that. And that's what
I find all sorts of comedy funny. So I probably couldn't agree with him on that because I find so much things funny. And like dark humor, that stuff that should not be funny, I find funny. So, but I understand completely what he's saying. He said that's not funny, that's politics. I understand what he's saying, but I found a lot of stuff funny
whatsoever. That's politics. You're just pandering to politics when you do that. And that's what Vedas is doing. I don't think he's a talented comedian. I think I don't have a high regard for him. Others may disagree. That's fine. It's my personal opinion.
I actually want to invite Veerdas on the show.
You should go ahead and do that.
Yeah, like
hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I want to know what his perspective was, honestly. Like, no matter how much we know about this situation, maybe he has his own side of the story. I believe he hadn't entirely grown up in India. So maybe the picture he has of India as a culture is kind of driven from the narrative he got growing up.
Neither did I grow up in India fully. I spent part of my formative years outside the country.
How is that? How is it like growing up outside India as an Indian?
You know what? When I was growing up outside of India, in Europe, in Switzerland, I was, to be honest, ashamed of being Indian. India had a very, very negative portrayal in Europe. India was regarded as a place of incredible poverty, incredible backwardness, backward culture, primitive culture, misogyny, backward religion. Hinduism is dirty and it's all that sort of thing. So I never spoke about being Indian, about my culture or anything. I was kind of ashamed of being associated with India. Wow. That's how I grew up for a few years. It's only after I came back to India and I traveled to other places, I got a more 360-degree worldview. And then when I started studying and researching history and all of that, that's when I started understanding what India really is. And that's when I slowly began to realize all these portrayals are lies and distortions, and they have a certain agenda behind them.
This is what I feel about most of the left wing in our country, that they've not traveled in the interiors as much.
I haven't traveled in the interiors of India. I've traveled outside of India. I have not explored India anywhere as much as I would want to. But I have explored India through writings, through my scholarly activities, through years and hundreds and thousands of years of study and researching history. Not just Indian history, but world history. That kind of puts you in the perspective of the entire world and what happened there. When you see the effect of colonialism with other countries, in Africa, in South America, in North America, even the effect of colonialism itself in Europe itself, because the true culture of Europe has been wiped out, which nobody realizes. So once you start to see all of that, then you realize what the patterns are and you start to understand what the distortions are. Because the same assault that was done on Europe's pre-Christian culture happened later on in India. The same tactics, the same brutality, the same attempt to portray the Indian culture as primitive and barbaric. It has to be replaced by something superior. So once you study all that, you get a better understanding of things. So even though I spent some of my formative years abroad, I now have a different idea of how things are based on actual data.
Before we move on to talking about Trump and Biden, which are our final segments, I do also want to ask you about the positives about USA, because I'm sure there are American viewers somewhere who are kind of questioning if we're just here to bitch out the country. It's not the case. We're doing a commentary. We're trying to keep it as objective as possible.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, this is a scientist, a historian we're speaking to. I also recommend you go check out all the other geopolitics episodes to really understand where we're coming from when we're speaking about all these concepts. We'll link it down below. Do you want to speak about some of the positives of America? For me, Silicon Valley is always going to be at the forefront in the world of startups, in the world of technology. Would you like to highlight anything else?
I think the US has been a driver of innovation in the world. Many of the technological breakthroughs that we all enjoy today have come from there. It used to have a culture of high achievement, a culture of pushing yourself beyond the limits, of aiming for the top, of never settling for second best. And the lifestyle is about freedom over there. It's about freedom, it's about individualism. I am kind of a black sheep in Indian society. I am more of an individualistic person, even though I have the greatest of respect for Indian culture and society. But I personally am kind of a person who loves freedom, more individuality. I like the wide open spaces that America has to offer. You can take a car and go for an all-night drive without encountering too many people. And you can,
Yeah.
if you have the money, you can do whatever you want in that country, as long as you don't
Facts.
break the law. So there are lots of
I always say, like, if you're rich, bro, I think the U.S. would be the greatest place for you to live. Like, if you're rich, I think it's like the most amazing place that you could live. Fortunately, it ain't a lot of rich people on earth. If you're not rich, then there's probably other countries that are better to live in for you, that provide more benefits, that provide more support, that it'd just be easier to live in. But if you're rich, I do think like the U.S. is probably the best country to live in, because like you can do anything, you can have anything. Like, but if I'm not rich, so I guess that's just an opinion. I can't say that for sure because I haven't been rich here. I've only been, I wouldn't say poor, but if lower middle class, I guess say most of my life, lower middle class. I'd say, but yeah, that's what I got to say on it. I don't know where else I wanted to go.
if you have the money, you can do whatever you want in that country, as long as you don't break the law. So there are lots of positives in the US. The people are overall a good people, broad-minded, happy people, welcoming people. I personally have not faced too much racism in the US. Sometimes I've felt that I was not quite welcome in some places, like in the interior of the US. But on the coasts, it's a very different society. It's a very different attitude. So there are so many positives that the US used to have to offer. It still has so many good people. It still has so many brilliant people. Lots of Indians go there to work and they excel and they rise to the top in the US. If the US was that xenophobic, that would not happen. So there is an element of good also in that society. They value a person who has talent. They value hard work. There's a lot to learn from that country, and I certainly wish this country nothing but the best. But this is just a commentary about what we are seeing, but I wish that country the best. I really like the country. I've been there multiple times. I've lived there on occasion. It's a great place.
The brutal truth is, between you and China, we'd always pick you. That's the honest truth, and which is why we have to speak about China, Edward Snowden, these angles where cyber warfare has become a thing. I think we briefly touched upon Obama. It is time to touch upon Trump. How do you look at him actually winning the election against Hillary? How do you look at his legacy of 4 years?
I think it was an accident that nobody anticipated. See, Trump is an outsider. He's not a politician. He's an entrepreneur. He's a
Yeah.
businessman. He's a high achiever.
Agreed.
And he got into the political race out of a hurt ego or something, right? And nobody expected that he would resonate, his message would resonate with the people, and he would
Facts.
actually end up winning the election.
Facts.
Nobody liked him among the political class. His own party despised him. When there was this motion for impeachment, his own party voted against him, some members of his party. And because of that, he was impeached. The impeachment succeeded. Now, how do I see Trump? I see him as a failure. Why do I see him as a failure? Because none of the policies and the objectives he had listed at the beginning, none of those he was able to achieve. He could not build the wall. He could not destroy China via the trade war. Various other things he wanted to do. Nothing was achieved. He was not able to achieve that because his party and the opposition both were against him. They say that the US president is the most powerful man in the world. Well, this guy was in power. He was the president. What happened? He was in office, but he was never in power. Somebody else.
Do y'all hear that? I've been saying it for so long. I'm so glad that he is saying it. This guy was in power, but nothing that he wanted to do came to fruition because his party and the other party were both against him. Yet he's supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. He was in power, but he didn't have power. Come on, man.
He was the president. What happened? He was in office, but he was never in power. Somebody else was running the show all the time. That tells you the brutal truth about the US. This guy was in office for 4 years. He was able to achieve nothing. It's not like he was incompetent. He could not become that rich by being incompetent. He certainly knows how to get things done, and yet he was able to achieve nothing. It's because of his status as an outsider who accidentally won the election. And this is a mistake they will never allow to happen again. It won't ever happen again.
Do you believe in the conspiracy theory that Russian and Chinese hackers were behind his win?
Yeah, bullshit.
What do you think the truth is?
See, when Trump wins, it's Russia. But when Biden wins, there's no Russia. How does that happen? Be consistent at least in your claims. If Russia interfered in 2016, they would certainly have been able to interfere in 2020. If they have the technological know-how to do that in 2016, in 4 years, their technological know-how will increase by a duration of 4 years. And they would certainly be able to do the same thing in 2020 as well. So how did Biden win? So now they say that the Russians could not do anything in 2020. Now the midterms are coming. Now again, they're claiming Russians will interfere. Decide once and for all what's happening. Are they interfering or are they not interfering? Or are they interfering only when you lose? So I don't believe in this nonsense.
How do you perceive Hillary Clinton in this whole fiasco?
Well, if Illuminati exists, then she's part of them.
What makes you say that?
Well, see, she is immune to everything that you throw at her. No charges stick. And she certainly finds her way into various positions of power. Even when she is not in any formal position of power, she still seems to be very powerful. She's very well connected. So is her husband. And there's something that transcends the political divide in the US. At the end of the day, they're all in the same boat kind of thing. That's
deep state.
Yeah, deep state, whatever you want to call it. Over time, if you observe these events, you see certain patterns that you can't really back up with data, but you can see them,
Keeping the deep state in mind, how do you think it perceives Hillary Clinton, Obama, Trump, now Biden?
It perceives Trump as a nuisance and it's got rid of him, and he's lucky that he's still alive, unlike 1966, if that was true. Kennedy. How does it see other powerful politicians? As tools, pawns. That's all.
And
Obama is very much on the team. if it is the truth, if the deep state is indeed a thing.
Okay. He's face of the team.
Yeah, for a while. And now he's one of the backroom workers, one of the more powerful people. He knows how things work. Yeah, he's been there for a while.
Biden?
Oh, Biden, I don't know what to call him. He's hardly conscious. He falls off bicycles.
He said, I don't know what to call him. He's hardly conscious.
He doesn't know what he is saying. He shakes hands with invisible people. When he's saying something, by the time he's come to the end of the sentence, he doesn't remember what he was saying at the beginning of the sentence.
Yes.
He's barely coherent, barely conscious. So I don't really take him very seriously.
Facts.
So here's my question. If the president of America is the leader of that country, he's also very likely the face of the branding of that country. When you think of America, you will think of Obama in 2008. You will think of Trump in 2016. And you will think of Joe Biden now. So, how could the deep state want someone like Joe Biden to actually become the face of the country?
It's a very interesting question. It's perplexing because I remember when I was a kid, there was this summit between the US and the USSR in Geneva. I think it was in 1986. Ronald Reagan from the US, Mikhail Gorbachev from the USSR. And Ronald Reagan was the older guy, so he would have appeared weaker. But he dressed in such a way that he appeared more dynamic and more youthful than Mikhail Gorbachev. And he made it a point to look better than Gorbachev. So the American state, the American presidents have always been very conscious that they should appear their best. And they should put the best foot forward. And it's all about representing the country and being the face of the country and enhancing the brand. Which is why it's very perplexing that they have somebody like Mr. Biden as the president. The only answer I would be able to give is that if the deep state is truly in charge of everything, then possibly they no longer care how the world sees them. That's the only answer I would have to give, nothing else. They no longer care how people perceive them. They're just gonna go ahead and do whatever they wish to do.
Or maybe a female president is getting elected next.
Maybe it's the prelude to bringing in a female president. That white men are now passé. We don't need them anymore. See what happened the last time. Let's get in a female president now. And maybe, hopefully, a black female president. Maybe.
Kamala Harris.
Maybe Kamala. Wow. Just imagine that. Imagine Lady Kamala is the president. That could very well happen in a couple of years. 24. Who knows?
How do you think Joe Biden's legacy is shaping up as of now?
I don't think he has much of a legacy to leave behind. I think it's all about inflation. The inflation has gone beyond, it's gone out of control.
It's going
ever
crazy.
since he came to power. Essentially, everything Trump said would happen has happened. So I think if it goes like this, he's gonna end up being remembered as somebody who's even weaker than Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is considered to be one of the weakest and worst presidents of the past 100 years. If it continues like this, Joe Biden will be remembered as even worse than Jimmy Carter.
One last question.
Shoot, I mean, he said an outsider won't ever get in again. And then Trump facing all these allegations, just got charged with all these charges. But I think people probably still gonna vote for him over Joe. I don't know. It's like, dang, it's two candidates up right now that if there is a deep state, I guess, yeah, you do got to think they just don't care no more. I still believe it's someone behind the wheel. The president is just a figurehead. So they probably don't.
This is for American viewers purely and listeners.
Talk to me.
The geopolitical map of the world right now. China is rising. We've mentioned repeatedly on this podcast how they're looking to surpass USA in around the year 2050. That's what they're targeting.
2050.
Keeping all the data points in mind, do you think that's likely going to happen? And if it is not to happen, how will it not happen? What will the USA have to do from a geopolitical perspective?
I think the biggest enemy, the biggest obstacle China could face is China itself. What's happening right now is that its economy is beginning to stagnate. It had more than a decade of 10% plus growth. It simply exploded. It went exponential for the longest time. It began in the late 70s. It picked up a little bit of steam in the 80s. 90s onwards, it just went like a freight train. Now, what we are facing is that China is beginning to reach the stage of a middle income nation. Now they can no longer afford that incredibly cheap labor to build stuff. So now the economy is kind of slowing down. It's around 5 or 6% per year officially. Maybe it's way lower than that unofficially in the real sense. And the other problem they are facing is that their population is rapidly aging. Their one-child policy is bringing home disastrous consequences now. Every Chinese person is alone. They don't have any siblings. They don't have any uncles. They don't have any aunts. They have no nieces, no nephews. It's a strange society they're living in.
That is wild to actually think about, dog. Like, no aunts, no uncles, no nieces, no nephews. Just a one-child policy. Wow. That is very fascinating.
Getting older. The whole nation, the average age is rising. In a couple of decades, it's going to be a graying nation. There'll be very few youth, statistically, as a percentage of the population. That is problematic. A country that has a youthful population always has a great future. India still has a youthful population. The Chinese are facing this demographic disaster. Their economy is also slowing. Their entire premise of replacing the US is predicated on their economy still continuing to grow, their military becoming more powerful, and their continuation of putting out dynamic leaders who can take the country forward. But if these problems continue to accumulate, the Chinese growth engine may stutter and stop and grind to a halt. It won't completely grind to a halt, but it will no longer be able to take them where they want to be by that time. So that may put the Chinese leadership under a great deal of pressure. Once societal pressures rise, then there is strife in the country. And there's already issues with COVID and all that, the very harsh lockdowns they've imposed. There has been open dissent in society. And that's coming out in social media, which is very rare for China. There are problems. There are cracks appearing. They may still be able to control it right now. But as time progresses, there may be problems that creep up and accumulate and become too large to bear. So then the Chinese may kind of panic. They may decide that whatever we can grab now, let's grab it and go to war. Try to grab Taiwan, grab something else, take over Japan, attack India. They could do something stupid.
Yeah.
They do something stupid, a whole lot of dominoes will fall. And then we could have anything that could ensue. So I think that the Chinese could be stuttering right now. They may not be quite on track to achieve what they wish to achieve. They still have the big economy. They still have the industries. But will they be able to sustain it for the next 20 years? That's a big question.
Again, lots more to unpack, but I would actually direct viewers to the first podcast that we did in the series, which is the World War III podcast. I think we did it about 3 or 4 episodes ago. We will be linking it down below. All I want to say right now is, especially for American viewers and listeners, if you all have listened to the podcast till this point, drop your suggestions about future topics. We're here to break down geopolitics even further. Send your questions. Sir, what is your Twitter handle?
Abhijit Chavda.
Okay. I'm at Beer Biceps Guy. Tag us. Send your questions. Send your suggestions. Send your feedback. We are trying to appeal to American audiences, European audiences, African audiences, Australian audiences, and kind of speak about geopolitics from a perspective that traditional news media cannot speak from. So, do you have any signing off notes, keeping that objective perspective in mind?
It's always beneficial to look at different angles. And we are speaking maybe from a neutral perspective or maybe from an Indian perspective, but it's a different perspective. It's one that you typically will not see in the West. Recently, our foreign affairs minister, external affairs minister, Dr. Jaishankar, went and gave a series of interviews in the
Love
West.
listening
None
to
of that
him.
was covered, even though he gives a very different perspective to how the world works, especially in Europe. He told the interlocutors over there that Europe needs to grow up and wake up and realize that Europe's problems are not necessarily the whole world's problems. When you don't think that the world's problems are not yours. So there's a whole different perspective that comes out of India, and India is now a genuine big player in geopolitics. India now matters, whether people like it or not. So it is important for the world to also try and understand the Indian perspective, because we don't see it from those binaries that exist in the West. So that would be great for the whole world to understand things in a more rounded manner.
Fair. Abhijit Chavda, sir, thank you. This was a fantastic episode as usual. Looking forward to creating a lot more. It's about 12:25 a.m. We've been recording all day to bring you the best possible content. Any last signing off note for the viewers?
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. All right, that
was an incredible podcast to get the chance to listen to and watch. Get the chance to expand your mind, and like you said, hear it from a different angle. It's always intriguing. It's always intriguing, fascinating, just getting to learn more, getting to learn secrets that we weren't privy to, getting to learn laws, and also hear some like-minded thinking on certain topics. But that is all we have for this video. Make sure you guys subscribe, ring notification bell, give the video a thumbs up. It's your boy Neal, out.